Watch this.
This is my favorite time of year. There's a lot going on. This building is a hop, and it is awesome.
It's Friday. You know what that means? We made it through the week. Here's what's on tap on the 208. Rush to the finish begins at the State House. Lawmakers are looking for answers on big questions, like, will we go back to a presidential primary? Appears there are two options on that. Sticking at the State House, should certain flags be banned from display at public school? Should any flag fly at school? What about just the American one? Lawmakers are getting down to the details. It's a celebration around the world for the brave, bold, and beautiful women in our lives. On International Women's Day, we're looking back at some of the women that helped make Idaho what it is today. If the expert guesses are correct, the Idaho legislature will wrap up 3 weeks from today. There are still all kinds of ideas floating around the State House, probably even more to come if we're being honest. But the only item that lawmakers have to take care of before they officially call it a session, budgets. Yes, the constitutional responsibility to get all the state agencies and departments funded. The early days of the 2024 session, we covered at length the new budgeting process that JFAC, the budgeting committee, began using this session. And long story short, the idea is to pass maintenance budgets, funding the basics, and then circling back to add new requests, supplementals, line, I should say. Now, lawmakers spoke out early in the session saying that they didn't like the process and they thought that crucial funding could fall through the cracks.
They're not what we had last year, which to me, that would be a maintenance budget. And then it's kind of being said that we'll go back and look at the line items and replacement issues.
So the concern from the critics of the new process is there's nothing binding lawmakers to circle back. Those base maintenance budgets can be all they technically pass, if Governor Little, of course, signs the bills. But legislative leaders, they shared their views on if the process is working at this point in the session. Democrats, Republicans see it differently. Democrats still worry about final budgets. Republicans, for now, seem to be satisfied.
We're doing all the trailer bills now to add to those maintenance budgets, which seems to be working fine. So I think a lot of the angst that people had about the process has eased.
It is yet to be determined whether we adequately fund the Department of Health and Welfare, education, whether 10,000 families who think their kids have money to go to college, in fact, get that money. A lot remains to be determined.
I will say that on the House and Senate floor, they are starting to really get through some of those budget bills. So we will circle back to all of this to see how it finishes up. Also, sticking with the State House, I wanted to circle back to a viewer question from earlier this week. Cindy in Nampa wrote to us saying, have our legislators fixed the presidential primary issue yet? And we got a lot of response from you about the caucuses that we'll talk about in a minute. But yes, they are working on the primary. Today on the Senate floor, lawmakers passed Senate Bill 1371. That would create a presidential primary election to be held on the third Tuesday in April of each presidential election year. It would also move the regular primary election date for the other offices to that same third Tuesday in May to the third Tuesday in April in even number years.
We will be confused about how to work through a session when we're thinking about running for election in April. It's hard enough as it is to stay focused on what we're doing here in the Senate. I do not want to be focused on a re-election campaign when we're headed for a primary in April.
I think it's been mentioned, maybe not the be-all, end-all, maybe not the perfect solution, but I am committed to seeing what we can do to have our citizens be able to vote for their president.
So you heard about some of the concerns, but again, it did pass. But if April isn't a good month and for some reason it gets stalled in the House, there is another option floating out there right now. Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder introduced another option this morning in committee. He says that would align for a May primary date. Okay, so what other legislation is out there as we zoom out and take a big, wide look at everything? A hot bill at the State House. It's stuck in committee, Andrew. Senate Bill 1362. They want to keep politics out of Idaho classrooms. House Ed Committee, though, they want to have more of a conversation.
Which is a surprise considering how successful this legislation was in the Senate. I think there was only 4 people voting against it. But essentially what the bill would do in simple terms is the legislation, Joe, what it wants to do is ban flags from Idaho classrooms that aren't state flags. It could also be the American flag, state flags, tribal flags, other government exemptions also exist for it. Now, the bill's intention has support in theory, but a lot of people in committee today, it couldn't really garner votes because of how it would work in practice.
At a workplace best known for disagreement,
and everything that goes with that,
Senator Chris Treacle was quick to call his stance neutral.
I'm trying to avoid partisan politics, and I'm being fair here.
Giving a nod to country.
Like we have back here with our national ensign and state flag.
And an axe to all else.
The classroom is not a place to be politicized.
But the focus of the legislation is written in its genesis.
We had a teacher flying the LGBTQ flag. It brought up a lot of decisiveness within my community, both for and against.
The latter of which shared their support for the bill.
But where is the flag for white, straight Christian boys?
Christy Hardy probably sounds familiar.
Over the last 2.5 years, I've helped lead a group in CUNA School District called Parents for Policy Change.
But you probably know her best after falling short in a CUNA school board race. She stole flyers from her opponent.
Yeah, if I see it in the jam, I put it in my hand, and that was wrong.
Step 2, influence the state to supersede your local policy.
This is one of the issues we have had concern about and would welcome direction from the state to settle the matter.
And for what would be a battle of testimony,
and I do go between for and against.
Hardy had no backup.
The rest are all against.
And the rest are vocal too.
From my experience, a lack of representation for the LGBTQ community opens the door for hate.
This bill will ban the pride flag and the transgender rights flag and is yet another attack on the LGBTQ community.
They do not view it as a political symbol. They view it as a beacon of safety and belonging.
But the biggest concern from lawmakers was found in the bill's language, or lack thereof.
I'm not sure what the penalty is here.
Senator Treacle.
It is completely up to the school how they want to handle the matter. The school comes in and tells me, hey, you can't fly that flag. You must take it down. I take it down. That's as far as the school wants to go. That's as far as the school can go.
Why are we writing a state law if at the end of the day it's going to be up to the schools how they want to handle this situation?
Everybody is much more aware of something when it is in law, vice when it is buried in a book of hundreds of rules and policies.
Further, the committee couldn't get over a failure to define terms, specifically what displaying a flag even means.
It means you are affirming that this is what you stand for.
But that's not written into the proposed law, and it could impact curriculum.
Suffrage flag, the banners that were used during the civil rights movement, during the Chicano movement.
Final disagreement before the final vote. It can never fall neutral.
Senate 1362 will be held in committee.
So that bill was tabled. So to revisit it, it would take a 2/3 vote from committee to reopen that bill, give it another look. There seemed to be interest in the intention of the legislation by many people in that committee, but how it would actually work out, the lack of definitions being one of them and what display even means, couldn't get through.
I'm curious, so what if I wanted to fly like a Denver Broncos flag? It shouldn't be a political thing.
They use Dallas Cowboys as an example, third-party flag. Now, I think politics are the intention of it. I guess the intention would be keep classrooms a safe environment focused only on education. But again, like a Dallas Cowboys flag, Broncos couldn't do that either with it.
What about an Idaho state flag?
Yes, because it's a government state flag.
Very good. All right, Andrew, we'll keep an eye on that one. Thank you. Okay, well, as you guessed it, we did not touch on all the legislation. We've got a lot more that went through this week, including 3 Senate bills on the National Guard, border security, and Idaho launch career paths. Take a look there. In the House, we covered 4 other bills on telehealth in schools, home equity theft, no public funds for transitioning procedures, and your favorite, cannibalism. Let's see where they all landed and where they are in this week's Legislative Wrap. On Monday, we told you about Senate Bill 1252, the Defend the Guard Act. It prohibits members of the Idaho National Guard from being sent into active duty combat unless Congress has declared war or explicitly called for the Idaho National Guard under Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution.
We haven't had that kind of commitment in this country since World War II.
The practical effect of this bill, it's my belief, will be that we don't get a seat at the table.
The bill passed the Senate and is heading to the House Transportation and Defense Committee. Tuesday, we introduced you to House Bill 684, legislation trying to allow public schools in Idaho to provide access to behavioral health services through telehealth to help with the high percentage of kids with mental health issues. Think a private room and a computer to access the appointment on school grounds. Mental health professionals would be selected by students and their parents.
There are kids in our school systems that need that help. And if we can get them that help, that is what we should do.
I'm just concerned that our schools are not doing their primary responsibility, which is reading, writing, and arithmetic.
House Bill 684 passed the House and is going to the Senate Education Committee.
They're allowed to profit off foreclosing.
Right now, when the county repossesses and sells a home for more than the original tax bill is worth, the government will keep the profit. On Wednesday, we dug into House Bill 444, looking to close a loophole so all future repossession gifts would be banned, giving the profit back to the former property owner. This bill passed both the House and Senate with unanimous support. It's on its way to the governor's desk now, where he's expected to sign it. On Thursday, we talked about Senate Bill 1390. That's narrowing down the definition of in-demand careers for the Idaho Launch Program. Idaho Launch passed last year, and it grants scholarships to graduating seniors pursuing in-demand careers. It's 80% off tuition, capped at $8,000 per student, and the new legislation narrows down what those in-demand careers are to ones with positive economic output for the state of Idaho and transferable skills. Careers needing a master's degree or higher would be eliminated. The bill passed committee with a do-pass recommendation to the Senate floor. The new bill proposing to take away public funds for gender transitioning medical procedures, House Bill 668, that passed the House committee yesterday and is headed to the floor, where the last bill on this, 520, it died. And last but certainly not least, House Bill 522. Yep, that's the one on cannibalism. The bill trying to amend Idaho's cannibalism law to expand the definition to include anyone who willfully provides the flesh or blood of a human being to another person to ingest without that person knowing. Oh boy, here we go. The legislation, it's chewing its way through the State House. Its latest meal, the House floor.
Prefer this bill were served with fava beans and a nice Chianti. I understand the lady's just trying to take a bite out of crime, so I will give this my green light.
That bill passed the House. It's now on the menu for the Senate State Affairs Committee. And that's a legislative wrap. All right, let's get to your viewer questions, comments. This is about the caucuses, the presidential caucuses we had last weekend. Former President Donald Trump won all 32 of Idaho's delegates in the first Republican presidential caucus since 2012. But the turnout, dismal. Only about 6% of registered Republicans voted in the caucus last Saturday. And of those 6%, some said that it wasn't what they expected. Mary in Twin Falls wrote to us saying, the caucus was a disaster. One of my major concerns is that the ballots were on a plain piece of paper with the candidates' names. Voters simply circled their choice. There was no identifying numbers. A radical and power-hungry group could easily substitute their choices without any way to trace the actual votes. Another person said, poorly organized caucus with no stop time on the website nor the flyer. We and about 25 others arrived at Eagle Middle School at 1:29 and were met with a polls closed sign and the District 14 rep telling us that there was no line by 1:30, so they closed the polls. However, at exactly 1:30, there were 25 very disappointed Republicans. Rhonda in Boise adds to the conversation. I watched the caucus participants in line waiting to vote. Overwhelmingly, the age of those voters were 60 plus years old. Not one young person I know have a hope our state party will turn around soon. Like we said earlier, there is legislation moving through the State House to bring back the presidential primary. If this one doesn't go far, they do essentially have another 4 years to try to get it right. of March is Women's History Month, and today marked International Women's Day, a day to stand up for gender equality and also recognize the achievements of women. Idaho women have impacted the political, cultural, and economic landscapes in Idaho, and they've made their marks in the academic, social, and civic fields too. They have and continue to be voices for change, trailblazers and barrier breakers, even beyond Idaho's borders. From Sacagawea to Kristen Armstrong, which is quite a range. Our photojournalist Kevin Esslinger introduces you to some of the Idaho women credited with creating and defining what Idaho is today.
I think the biggest message is that anyone can be a trailblazer. This exhibit features over 100 women, all from or living in Idaho. The women featured in this exhibit are from all walks of life, from all parts of the state, have impacted everything from their very small local community all the way up to the national level. My name is Sarah Phillips, and this exhibit is Trailblazing Women of Idaho. We wanted to make sure that visitors really understand the impact of people's stories and understand that women from the past affect us in the present and can inspire us into the future. Gabby Lemieux, she's a Shoshone-Paiute tribal member who is also a professional golfer. She works with the Nike N7 project to really inspire other Native Americans to get into professional sports, also showing that women can do anything. We've got stories of Bonnie McCarroll, who was a rodeo star. She was known around the world, really, as one of the foremost female rodeo stars. Her legacy really changed women in the rodeo and kind of showed that in a man's world that is a rodeo, women can be just as successful. We are extraordinarily fortunate to have 5 gold medals featured all in one exhibit. We have gold medals from Gretchen Fraser, Muffy Davis, and Kristen Armstrong. We also have items on exhibit from Emma Edwards Green. So the state seal will be exhibited for everyone to see, as well as 2 other pieces of her artwork. We feature Linda Koppel-Trout. She's the first female Supreme Court justice in Idaho. We've worked with her to have her judicial robes loaned to us for the duration of the exhibit. 2 of Idaho's women astronauts, Barbara Morgan and Ellen Ochoa, have loaned us their flight suits. My favorite story is one that only a handful of people, I think, are familiar with. Mildred Bailey was a Coeur d'Alene tribal member, and she actually laid the groundwork for American jazz sound in the 1920s. Every road I walk along. Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett have both commented on her sound being key to their sound, so that really key American jazz sound was highly influenced by a woman from Idaho. I hope people walk away feeling empowered, understand the legacy of women who came before us, and to inspire all of the women of the future.
You may be wondering, how are these women chosen to be a part of that exhibit? And it was actually by a statewide committee of women who helped identify the trailblazers. And the exhibit was part of the celebration of the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. This year, there isn't a women's exhibit at the Idaho State Museum, but you can look at the women's history documents online through the Idaho State Archives digital collection.
had some beautiful ice formations as those cooler temperatures and the fog were sticking around, but it gave way to some really also beautiful blue skies across the area. So some of those ice formations have likely melted by now, but you can still see beautiful views over towards the Boise Mountains. And it's a similar view across several areas in the region. Almost hardly a cloud in the sky. Temperatures nearing 45 degrees over in Boise, about a 10-degree difference from over in Twin Falls. And you might be thinking the sunshine is just kicking off the weekend and we're going to see even more of it. But we're going to run a little short on some of the sunny skies as clouds start to work their way back in the area. And so by tomorrow afternoon, we'll be seeing more of the clouds. Valley should stay mainly dry, but as we go into Sunday, we'll see a little bit more of that moisture work its way in. It's a similar trend for the mountains, mainly on the drier side for Saturday, but evening light snow working its way in, and then Sunday a little bit more moisture. We could even see a rain-snow mix at times for some of those mountain locations, but the winds will be picking up as we go into tomorrow, so breezy as the clouds increase in valley locations, but you can see more of that moisture starting to work its way in on Saturday, and Sunday that will continue as well. But again, things are expected to stay a little on the lighter side. You can see that some of that moisture is expected to stay, again, light. I think we'll just see some sprinkles in valley locations, but you can see through your 7-day forecast, breezy conditions sticking around, more of the 50-degree temperatures, but more of the rain will be coming back into the mixture as well.
All right, let's get to some of your comments to end the week. This person says, why doesn't the Congress go through all the budgeting first until the last day or two, just like they did last year? They said they came back They didn't want to, it'd be nice if they're actually doing their job like they're supposed to. Yeah, a lot of good points there from Bob saying maybe they should take care of some of the business before they do things like cannibalism. It's difficult because it is a moving target and they're doing so many things at the same time, but I've seen plenty of your feedback and I've also heard from lawmakers. We will see what the budgeting looks like in the future, but it looks like it's working so far. We'll find out in the end. This person says flags in schools, they represent the community around the school, so they shouldn't be there. Schools should support that same community and make everyone feel included. I would only exclude flags that represent hate. That's from Sean. This person says, who would ever fly a Denver Broncos or Dallas Cowboys flag? That would result in bullying. Mike in Twin Falls. Fair point. I grew up in Denver, so might be a little differently here. Maybe a Boise State Broncos flag. I don't know. This person says, Joe, as I watch your legislative review, I keep asking myself, what in the world are they doing? That's from Bryce. Bryce, who knows? You never know what could happen down there. It's always an exciting time. This person says, can you fill us in on where we're at with Senate Bill 1329 on parental rights? That has actually cleared the Idaho Senate, and it is waiting to get taken up in the other chamber. So it is on the third reading calendar. It looks like it should go next week. We can circle back to that. And this person telling us a little bit about their caucus experience wasn't so positive. We'll see what type of feedback that ends up making a difference in the future. All right, see you next week.